Welcome to the Prophecy of Daniel, where we're going through the book of Daniel verse by verse to get insight into the heart of God and His will in this world for the coming of His kingdom in the past, present, and future of the literal coming of His kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And we are also going through the book of Revelation in a series called End Times, and these two books, to many degrees, go hand in hand together like many of the other prophets do. So as we've gone through the book of Daniel, what we've seen so far is we spent a lot of time talking about this besiegement of Jerusalem. And most people that go through the book of Daniel, they just say it was besieged. But as we saw, this besiegement took place for 22 years. Jeremiah the prophet prophesied about it while it was taking place. He was warning them of what's to happen. And a significant piece of that warning was that God was going to take His hands off of Jerusalem and Israel and Judah. And anybody left there was just going to, His hands are off of them, meaning they're in danger. They are now going to go through famine, pestilence, bandits, raids, death. It's not a pretty sight for those left in Jerusalem, but those led off to Babylon in captivity, His hand is with them and He is going to bless them, and they're going to turn to God, and they were going to see Him as God, and they're going to draw closer to each other. God and the Israelites are going to become closer through the captivity. So this captivity is a very good thing for the Israelites. And this episode, we just got introduced to Daniel on the last episode. In this episode, we're going to kind of take a closer look at this favor that God is raining down on them by this first story of Daniel himself and what he went through. Because he has already been drawn into the favor of the chief of the eunuchs, who has been put over Daniel and his friends to train them up to serve in the king's court, because they are kind of choice young men from Judah. They are well-educated, good-looking, wealthy individuals, so that's the people the king Nebuchadnezzar wanted in his court. So they're being trained for 3 years. So we're just going to pick it up at that point. And I want you to kind of focus on the favor that God is giving them as we come back to this. So we're going to pick it up in Daniel 1, chapter 5. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Now from among them, those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now I'm going to pause there real quick, because this is significant. What Daniel's concerned about is the laws of Moses, not the Ten Commandments, but the food laws that they put down. He's concerned that he will be disobeying those things that were written in Leviticus, Exodus, and Numbers. These are a great concern to Daniel. He does not want to defile himself with food. Now, typically what we see in the evil Babylonian spirit of the world that exists today and has always existed in the world since the very first civilization of Babylon is that people will quickly go the way of the Babylonians, because ultimately what's happening to Daniel has been taken in captive. He's been given luxuries, and then he said, here's a bunch of delicacies, some awesome food, some wine. You guys hit it. Have fun with this awesome food and these drinks and the clothes and the way of life that we're giving you. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he was not going to go the way of the Babylonians. And that's significant, because that's the piece of the relationship that we have to have. All right, let's pick it back up in 9. Now God brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. Very significant. God brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink, for why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? then you would endanger my head before the king. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our continence be examined before you and the continence of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies, and as you see fit, so deal with your servants. Now I want to pause there because there's a significant piece taking place. Everybody else has already chosen to go the way of the Babylonians. So he's comparing, him and his three friends, they're comparing themselves to everybody else that came out of Judah, who are definitely defiling themselves. All right, let's keep going. 14. So he consented with them in the matter and tested them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenance appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away the portion of the delicacies of the wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables. As for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. So because they purposed themselves to not defile themselves with the delicacies and the wine of the king, God not only put them in favor of who's in charge of them, but he literally gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. This is very significant favor that God is giving them. He is giving Daniel and his friends insight into his ways and into his spirit and into how he works, his plans for the future. He's given them knowledge of literature, worldwide renowned literature. He is literally increasing their knowledge set. It's something that we can see through Scripture all over. This is a prayer that God grants, and when you pray for knowledge, He gives it. It's not something He says no to. All right, let's continue on. Now at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. Then the king interviewed them, and among them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they served before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding about which the king examined them, he found them 10 times better than all magicians and astrologers who were in his realm. Thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. Ultimately, what God did here was he said through Jeremiah during this besiegement, this two-decade plus besiegement that went through 3 different kings of Judah, that he was going to take his hands off of everybody left behind and put his hands with those being led off into captivity. And among all those people that defiled themselves with the king's delicacies, which is what most of the world, even today, will do, I can guarantee you 100%, you could take 95% of Christians in America and you put them in a place like Babylon where they could just relish in sex, food, drunkenness. They will quickly do it. It is only a few. It is a remnant. Daniel and his friends are a remnant in captivity. It is only a few that will say, this is wrong. What you are doing is wrong. I know everybody else is doing it, but it's wrong. And they set their heart to not defile their bodies. This is not a sin against the world. It's a sin against self. And they chose not to commit that sin. As a result, they've been in good favor with the chief of the eunuchs first. They were given wisdom and knowledge in all literature and understanding and interpretation of visions and dreams and God's way and prophecy. And ultimately what it did is then it brought them into good favor of King Nebuchadnezzar, and they served directly in front of him. They were at the top of the top. And believe it or not, it even gets better for these 4 as they move forward. And I just want to tell you, you don't get God's favor by defiling yourself. You don't get God's favor by just indulging in sin. It didn't say that all of Judah was in God's favor. It said these 4 were in God's favor because they chose to purpose their hearts to not defile themselves because God asked them not to. And they immediately said, yes, sir. That's why they are in such good favor with God. He told Jeremiah that he was going to do it, and now he is literally doing it to the people that chose not to go the way of the Babylonians and the Chaldeans. We see the same thing in the world today, and you have to see it. Most Christians in America are indulging in the delicacies. They're defiling their bodies with pornography, sex, adultery, gluttonous eating and drinking, and it's the Babylonian way. It's the way of the Chaldeans is how most Christians in America are living. But there is a few that have chosen not to defile themselves among their Father because he had asked them not to, and they're willing to say yes sir to their Heavenly Father, just like Daniel did. As a result, only favor and blessing come from that. So we're going to stop there. We're going to maybe spend a little bit of time kind of talking about the food piece. I don't want to dedicate a whole episode to it, but ultimately it comes from Leviticus, Exodus, and Numbers. Things they couldn't eat, like pork. There was a lot of rules laid on the Israelites, specifically the Israelites, not the laws of Moses, the Ten Commandments. There's a lot of laws of Moses that apply to us even today, but there's a lot that don't, because Jesus made it very clear that those pieces are over. So the eating piece is over. So I hope this video helps. I just do want to settle this, that when he said, thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus, Daniel served Nebuchadnezzar until the Persians conquered Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, and that was King Cyrus, who then he served with King Cyrus after that. And we'll see that in Daniel. So I just want to make that clear, that this, when they say he served the king until King Cyrus, that still hadn't happened. It's just making a note that this is going to continue through the story of Daniel until the Persians conquer the Babylonians. So hope these videos are helping. Stick with us. I'd ask everybody, just kind of purpose your heart to not go the way of the Babylonians. It's so easy, and I know it to be easy as well, because I've been in Babylon myself. So hope these videos are helping. If you have any comments, put them below. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support this channel through Patreon, that link is also below. But the most important part of this channel, we take prayer requests. So please don't ever hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.